And we're on after many fuck ups and snafus, half of them my fault. So how's everybody? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Things are good. We had a real overly successful Babylon this year, so everybody's pretty psyched about that. Ended up that Order of Emergent Magi, along with some IoT people and some OTO members and some Satanic Temple members. Yeah, we threw down a main ritual, which you got to be one of the primary kind of writers for. So how you feeling, man?
I feel pretty good about it. It was an amazing fucking experience. I think all of our rituals went really well. Um, we generated a lot of interest in EMK,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
my gutter Bible ritual went very well. And
Yeah, right. Trial in the Gala was cool. We had a really good turnout for kind of our mass, kind of induction that we were doing because since we don't have degrees and we're not an initiatory body, kind of did our like little first massive Mungloff, which was wildly successful, and that kind of bled into and was a part of the main ritual which was kind of cool how we were able to incorporate that. And this year was definitely kind of a huge step forward as far as like there's always been the vibe at Babylon that we've got, like people that practice the lema and people that are, chaos magicians or whatnot, and disparaging beliefs, and everybody kind of comes together, and there's Wiccans, pagans, whatever. Everybody does this thing that is this kind of unified front and work together, and it's always been a kind of work together type thing leading up to this, but not, I don't think, on the level that we had the overlap of this year, where it's really kind of come to be the point where it's like, yeah, it's this new thing. It's not really any of these disparaging groups. Our idea about OM and the meeting of the tribes and what we're talking about on these podcasts and EMK and all this kind of stuff really came to real world fruition, if you will, this year. And yeah, man, I'm super psyched about next year. I'm already like planning stuff for it. And, I'm already having conversations about it. So that's really kind of good. Definitely, I think Babylon this year was, with the exception of one or two other, meetings, or group things that I've done in my life, definitely top three magical meetings that I've ever been to, as far as like just the energy and the work that got done, and meeting new people. Yeah, it was excellent. I think the festival's really kind of taken a lot of leaps forward in the last 12, 13 months or so, and it really kind of showed this year.
yeah,
So yeah,
it was interesting. The festival started out as a thelemic event many years ago,
primarily, yeah.
11 years ago. But, everyone was always invited to come and join in. And, we've seen the growth of the different tracks there, the chaos track, the, the love, the sex magic track.
Yeah, Scarlet track, right.
Yeah. The thelema track. And this was the first year that, the thelema folks that are the organizers, the main organizers, felt comfortable enough to kind of pass the baton to someone else, which was us, and have us do the main ritual. We
Right,
did
right.
we did more presentations than anyone else, and I know that I've heard from folks in the thelema community that they feel like they need to up their game, and not.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'd say sure. It's always good to have friendly competition. I think at least it's good to be taken more seriously as chaos magicians, by the more old school Thelemic folks. With that being said, of course, a lot of the Thelemites and OTO people were involved with the kind of the main stuff as well still. So that's cool, and also really you've got a lot of key players that really have either just worked with OM or worked with other organizations outside their initiatory system. And that's kind of really that's kind of a growing group. I think you've got people that have been working with us in the group since at Babylon for several years now, 5 or 6 years, that are their own as, seasoned magicians, if you will, but through our system, not through, the OTO or the IoT, but through the OEM and through emergent magic and, being exposed to the gutter Bible and seeing the stuff that we kind of do. So that's exciting. It's exciting to be, at the beginning of, a magical order and a magical tradition that seems to be picking up speed quite a bit, faster, certainly than I anticipated. I guess that segues a little bit. We had a fellow occultist who has been teaching EMK that was going to be a guest tonight. Unfortunately, our communications got jumbled and won't have him on this particular week, but I'm sure again at another time. And I guess there's a couple things that I had prepared to talk with him about that we could touch a little bit on.
Okay, and also we can talk a little bit about how some of the work that we did at Babylon Rising is very much an example of what EMK is all about. And I'm gonna kind of tread a little dangerous ground here because I'm talking about our particular group. So I hope I'm not breaking any oaths. But so one thing that we did when we were at Babylon Rising is we needed to rename our group because we had a merging of two magical groups, and it wasn't, like we wanted to carry on just one name. And we wanted to make something new with this coming together. And kind of the first thing we did was try to develop an egregore. And for those who don't know what an egregore is kind of a group-created spirit. It's a group-created consciousness that has its own power and it serves the group and looks over the group if that's what they're created for. And, I think
essentially a god form, a higher spirit form, in the classical sense, and egregore, which is referred to as an egregore.
Right.
An entity, a thought form, magical spirit, essentially, that is believed in by a number of people. So, you go back where you would have, in the olden times, each, tribe or each camp or whatever would have its own different version of God or its own, kind of egregore. And then, as time goes on, a lot of those egregores get swept up together and then they become bigger ones, like Isis or Osiris that, combined a lot of the little tribal gods as, society kind of built. So there's different levels, but yeah, what we're talking about here is essentially a servitor, but, a servitor with a little bit more oomph, if you will, like a next level up servitor, if you're kind of going down the line of magical workings from, sigils at first and thought forms to, servitors, small spirit entity type things up until like egregore, something that's more like a god that can act in of its own volition, ideally, or philosophically, I guess that would be the goal with an egregore. Can kind of make its own decisions. You don't have to call it up all the time, be like, oh, today I need to be healed. Oh, I need to do this. It just kind of, fall down the steps on its own, metaphorically.
But to me, why it was such a good example of emergent magic is that, we decided that we weren't just going to give it a name. We weren't just going to say, well, this is our new name, or we weren't going to just combine two names.
Right.
We were going to actually use a magical ritual.
Or find something out of a story in a book, or find obscure Lovecraftian phrase and use that, or any of your more traditional ways of naming your temple or naming your group or group in this case.
Right. And so
to use the vague term.
Right. So we actually used a magical ritual to come up with this name, where essentially we traded around cards with important letters on it and interacted with each other during the ritual until we got to a point where we received, had a certain number of cards that we laid out, and it kind of gelled into its name. And I think that's a perfect example of emergent magic, of something that comes from
you've got a ritual
itself.
yeah, you've got a ritual where you've got the different parts of what can make up the name, and then the ritual, the functionality of the ritual is that you're essentially randomizing and shuffling those through some, using mudras or different mantras, or whatever kind of way you end up doing it. It's interesting that you brought that up as an example of emergent magic, something that had dawned on me while we were hanging out at Babylon with my good friend, the former Frater Ratatosk, Josh Wetzel. Is essentially you can trace EMK in the beginning of what would be the Order of Emergent Magi and Ogham, all to one conversation I had with Mr. Wetzel back in, I want to say, 1999. And at that point, I was interested in the IoT. He's a published author and an IoT member that's been out, so I'm not like betraying anything here by mentioning him. Please buy his books. Paradigmal Pirate is excellent. You can find it.
I will put a link in the show notes.
Frater Ratatosk, I believe was his frater name at the time, Mr. Josh Wetzel. But anywho, I had met him at a public, kind of workshop lecture that the Illuminates of Thanateros were putting on in Milwaukee at the time at a Mason Lodge. It was a presentation by him and also Dave Lee. This might have come up before in past episodes, but I had started to work a little bit with him and IoT members following that, 1998, 1999, this would have been. And one of the first times me and him hung out, we're just hanging out, and him about the name of the temple, which I can say now because it's a long defunct temple. Again, this is almost 20 fucking years ago in an area that doesn't even have a temple anymore. But at the time, there was a temple back in the olden days, and right before the turn of the millennia. There was a temple in Milwaukee called Draghulkia, and I was a novice back in the early days of my magical career working with them, and I had asked about the temple name. I was like, what, how did you get your temple name? Where did you come up with the temple name? I didn't recognize it from anything, that I'd read or whatever, it seemed to be Egyptian maybe. And I was just kind of wondering. And he just looked at me and he's like, from a ritual, like with this, like total matter of fact, like, kind of like pleasantly phrased disdain, if you will. Like, and that right there, that totally fucking dawned on me. Everything changed. It was like, oh my God, from a ritual, of course. Where else would you get a magical name? And from that point, I immediately wanted to have, that started me on my quest for my new magical name, which would take about 8 years to get. And that ended up being through a ritual as well. I guess we could talk about that a little bit, which is kind of an interesting story. Where did Zentra El get his name? But yeah, so from a ritual, those 3 words, in the intro to Emergent Magic, when it comes out, my like 2-page blurb will probably start with these 3 words, and this tale begins from there, because that was that was the touch off that got me going on stuff. It's like, well, it's a ritual to get the information that you need, instead of like, okay, I need to get, this, I need to get this certain item, instead of going to a grimoire and figuring out what symbol gets you that item, you call up a spirit or something and get a symbol from them and then use that, it added a whole different layer to stuff for me. And that really kind of planted the seed of what eventually would be Emergent Magic. And I always had aspects of Emergent Magic in my work from that point kind of on, but not in the realm of which, that what we fell into once the Gutter Bible came into play, because that took it to a whole nother level. I was doing a lot of emergent stuff, but I was certainly a chaos magician in the purest type of sense until, late 2013, 14, when I really started to figure out what I had done with the Gutter Bible was kind of it had ended up taking on a world of its own and being a different kind of newer thing, pure EMK, if you will, the new paradigm of emergent magic.
Yeah, and it probably was the only way that could be pure was getting that kind of found volume, because otherwise, you
Right.
have all the background.
You've got the trappings of the author, and you've got you've got essentially the weight, you've got the egregoric weight, to use that term again, of, what that grimoire has, people's feelings of it, because it's been around for a while. Whereas with, our grimoire and our egregoric energies, we're experiencing them for the first time ever now. So everybody else that we work with, it's also experiencing it for the first time. So for these next, few generations, at least, for at least hopefully the next couple 100 years, it should be a really exciting and kind of developing and fresh paradigm. And then by that point, it's hard to say 200 years from now, our modes of communication as human beings could be so utterly outside of anything that we can conceive of right now that emergent magic will be completely obsolete. I mean, like,
one would hope that things are,
or we'll be scratching around like the wastelands, have mutated, and the gutter bile will be the only thing keeping us together.
You never knew.
Could go either way. Could go either way, man.
Another reason why I thought that ritual in particular was a good example of emergent magic, because it was a group ritual. It was a bringing together of influence of different magicians. It wasn't just you sitting around coming up with the stuff and extrapolating it. It's the influence.
And again, that's a good way of quantifying that too, because to shoot back to what I was saying, like, one person, say, like, if you're going to figure out your magical name, you could have a randomization ritual like that you could essentially do yourself, or even with like one other person. Even if you had one other person, and that's starting to have veins of emergence to it, but not in the way where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this with 20 people. Then now you're talking about. Now we're getting into the realm of EMK. Now you're talking about we're going to do 20 people, and half a dozen or 18 of them I barely know, or a meeting for the first time. Now it's starting to get a little bit more away from classical chaos magic and into EMK and emergent magic. The more people that you have, because again, we're talking about group magic stuff, group mind experience,
And it takes even the next leap of emergence, because that was actually there was a first ritual that we were looking for, like images and things. And then there's the second ritual where we also, at the same time that we came up with the name, we prepared a canvas where one of our members is going to take the information from the first ritual and the name and combine those together to make a drawing, a picture of what this egregore may look like. And then I'm certain that we're going to take that and continue on trying to communicate with this egregore, bolster this egregore, and have it, keep us together as a group.
Right. Sure.
So that it's not only one ritual and we're done, or two rituals and we're done. It's the long evocation, it's the slow magic. It continues and it keeps developing and it keeps refining and it keeps bringing it up and trying to make it better.
Right. Yeah. Very good point. I certainly liked all the EMK stuff that we worked on over the Babylon weekend. I thought all turned out really well. So absolutely.
Cool.
What else? Anything else we want to hit on about Babylon, or what do you got on your agenda? Do we have any questions from listeners?
I don't see any questions, but people are free to jump into the live chat here. I am monitoring it, and I'll keep an eye out for those.
So I'd like to do we could do my quick little. I had this prepared for our colleague, and we can come back to this later. And this is something that's been brought up with one of our sisters in OM. And her essentially question is, well, her concern is that emergent magic and EMK is not very easily defined via our webcast, and that people that aren't into kind of this super intellectual or quasi intellectual, I guess, pseudo intellectualism that we spew, with the like encyclopedic or encyclopedic whatever knowledge of all these obscure terms like egregore and all this stuff. And
well, I did a good job in trying to slow you down and refine it and define them while we're doing it, but go on.
Right. I agree. But her feeling is that we need a very simple, what is EMK, that doesn't, go off on a vine about retroactive enchantment or, consciousness creating alternate universes. And so I've thought about this now for a week or two or so.
So you got something?
I think I've got something. Now I know we've been trying to define EMK since we started the podcast, and we're in several episodes in now, and I know we've made runs at definition, but this time this is going to be this is like under 3-minute definition.
Under 3 minutes. Wow.
Well, okay, it's not. It's going to be under 5. Let's just start with my. Okay, so as far as I've come to understand it, here's the thing with EMK and Ohm. Essentially, magic, as it's been taught or learned before, comes out of a group. Group comes along, right, and they modernize or they make more efficient, another group, so the prevailing occult group of the times, methods, say Golden Dawn, back in the day. They elevate it. Make it a little bit better or research it better or something, and through the strength of that and through the strength of different people that learn this type of occultism, magic is taught. And magic is taught with a certain type of definition and a certain type of goal, and essentially the people in these groups are able to then quantify these things for you. They're able to say, like, okay, now you've reached this next goal in your magic practice. Now you've reached this next goal. And then you move up within the system and within the chain and become higher adepts or higher levels of the magic. It's different with Order of Emergent Magi and Emergent Magic, because what we're coming along and saying is not that there is, that we have the better system of magic. What we're coming along and saying is that there isn't really a better system of magic, that you have to find it for yourself. And not only do you have to find that magical system for yourself, but the successes in your magic, and this is probably the most important part of it, but like it is not something that can be quantified by the order or by the people that are teaching it. So the old school way is Crowley comes along, he's like, I got the book of the law, this is the way, learn this, and I can tell you when you're moving up and we're going to do this thing together. As I'm coming along and saying, here's this gutter Bible, this is like essentially a shoe stone, a magical tool that we can divine from and build magic, but I have no idea how to do that or what the right way to do it is, other than to say that if we build it together with a larger group, that it's going to make more sense and it's going to be more powerful. So basically, emergent magic is the magic that you have to define for yourself. It's magic that doesn't really have rules, in the sense that it even doesn't not have rules, like chaos magic, where it's like, not having rules is the thing. It's not even that in that way. It's simply, a new form of philosophy. And in addition to that, in addition to being something that you define yourself, it has tinges of morality, it has levels of morality, and it has humanity injected into it, which chaos magic doesn't. And Thelema, I think, does in a way that can seem to come off hollow. And what I'm getting at with this is just what we talk about with the ancestors, the idea that those that come before us look over us, and the idea that you live your life in a positive type of way that they would look down and be happy about. And even if it's a general sense, we talked about ancestors before as not being blood people in your bloodline, but even the sense of like those that have come before us, you know, like the idea, or even to go into the future, those that'll come after us, a general sense that like we're here to do things to kind of make things a little bit better. You know, it's not nihilistic magic. You know, EMK has a, you know, and that's not to say that there's a morality in EMK, like, you know, this must be allowed by all, you know, people in OM must accept this type of behavior at all times, or must always condemn this type of behavior, because that's not really what I'm saying. But
yeah,
there's
no 10 commandments of OM.
Right.
But it's like,
right.
To me, we do have that morality, and that the purpose of our magic, you know, you could use magic for a lot of things, but one of the main purposes of magic in EMK is to strengthen and support your tribe. That's one of the reasons why. Maybe one of the main reasons why you do magic.
You know, and that brings me back to let's give another perfect example, and this is going to go 100% along with my definition here, to give you, as far as like an example, to give you a definition of emergent magic. And this has to do with our Dr. Seuss ritual, which you know, this is all publicly published. So yeah, we did a Dr. Seuss ritual. It's an Umbris ritual, which essentially this is a chaos magic working. It's kind of fun. Dr. Seuss stuff is really fun to work with. So this entity in this book, On Beyond Zebra, and anyone that does not have On Beyond Zebra by Dr. Seuss definitely should check it out. It is a grimoire of Dr. Seuss entities. It's almost identical to Goetia. The first page is the same depiction as the tarot, with man standing on a precipice with like the sack over his shoulder, and a little white dog. But anyways, there's an entity in there, the Umbis, that we've worked with before, because it's a lot of fun to do this ritual, because it's this long kind of many other uttered cow. And representation of it for the ritual is we do like a conga line, and everybody dances around in the conga line and chants the mantra of the Umbis, which is Umbis and there's drumming, which is a lot of fun. It's a great ritual to do. And we had such a massive turnout this year, we actually had to do a two-headed Umbis, which was pretty cool. It was 2 conga lines in a row. We've done this several times and always had a good turnout, but the turnout this year was massive. Like I think there might have been 40 people out there. When usually there's a couple dozen or so. But yeah, it was quite excellent. We had to do side-by-side umbuses, but or umbi. The plural of umbuses is, I think, umbuses. It's not umbusai. But anyways, so yeah, two-headed umbus. And afterwards, I was having a conversation with one of the hostesses of the Babylon Rising Festival, Lorelei, and I was introducing her to one of our friends, a frater who had come up with the paradigm, our good friend from out east. And you know, she's like, I really want to tell you something about my experience with this ritual. We had done this ritual at the old space for Babylon, which was, you know, this is several years ago, before it was at Midian, when it used to be in a place called Our Haven. And this was when the space was essentially rented out by the organizers of Babylon, whereas now it's owned. The festival's owned by them. So we're on our own land now. But before, we had done this, you know, at the old spot, and it was pretty successful. And she's like, you know, we had a lot of fun doing that. And she's like, you don't know this, you would have no way of knowing this. But when I was in that line, it was me and her husband, and the 2 people in between them up in front were they're like 2 good friends, Marcus and his wife, who we've worked with as OM, and has been one of the people that's worked with us for years and years and years. And she's like, that was the first time we had met. None of us had met each other before. That was their first time at the festival. You know, and we had all done this ritual for the first time. We ended up just randomly being in this conga line together. When everybody lined it up, we were just standing by each other. And she's like, you know, that ended up being such a huge thing, because we talked after that. We became friends after that. It was this fun ritual. We're all laughing and like hugging afterwards. And we ended up talking, hanging out. And since then, they are like our best friends. Like, we've lived together. Like, we've spent all kinds of time together. They continue to be our best friends. Like, you know, they're one of the main other people that help organize and put the festival together and do security and like all that stuff. So the idea of like doing a wealth ritual and having the result be like meeting these people who end up, being your close friends and, being your best friends over years of time. That is at the core of EMK. That's exactly what we're talking about. That's the kind of unforeseen type of, you're doing a general wealth ritual, but it's not money or, a car or something like that. It's this connection that you make with other people that helps build the community. And that's what it's about. Emergent magic is saying that, what people think is magic, like the pentagrams and the dressing black all the time and, the goat's head and all that stuff. That's all a lot of fun. It's great fun to dress up your spirituality. It's cool to wear black all the time. Everything matches. Like, all that stuff's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not like what magic is. It's not about pulling up these spirits inside of circles and triangles and sending them out to, curse your neighbor's cow or to get you a girlfriend or whatever. Magic is about like creating connections in your community, meeting people, creating connections, and having experiences with people on a spiritual level. If it's a funny ritual, if sometimes it's a serious ritual, it's important to do all to cycle through stuff too. That's what chaos magic kind of gave us as a gift that we already have now in practicing emergent magic, is that we know that you can't just do all serious Thelema all night long. You can't just do all hardcore black magic Cthulhu all night long, because people get burned out on it. You've got to have a fun ritual. You've got to have this. You've got to have a dancing ritual. You should also have mellow rituals. You should also have more serious stuff. You can't just do Discordian bullshit all night, because then you get swept up in a way. That's where chaos magic slipped a lot. You get swept up in a way of just silliness with no kind of point. So, there's a fine line to draw there, but that's what emergent magic is about. That it's about teaching people that it's not these things. It's not this Harry Potter stuff. It's about, let's go out, into the woods. And let's get together at the back room at a bar and like do some Dr. Seuss stuff and like do some, whatever, do some candle magic, any of these different things. But like, that's what EMK, that's what the goal of EMK is.
And
it's to create magical communities and to create connections so that people have a spiritual consciousness together again, which we don't. People don't all go to church anymore. It used to be that way. It used to be you walk outside, all your neighbors, everybody went to church together. There was this kind of communal spiritual thing. As sterile as it may have been, at least it was kind of there. We don't even have that anymore.
And that's been the purpose of ritual for hundreds of thousands of years, to bring communities together. And right. Somehow modern magic lost that. And I don't understand why, people were being taught that you can, I've said this 100 times before, that you can, just go into your basement and do the LBRP and do these rituals and you're a magician. And you're missing out on so much when that's all that you do.
Right. I mean, I think, I've been throwing this around for a while. This is another thing too. There's a big difference between magic and occultism. And a lot of there's modern groups that are great at occultism. You've got people that spend tons of their free time doing almost nothing but magical practices, different types of meditations, different types of sigil work, different types of sex magic, all this kind of stuff all the time. And they dedicate tons and tons of hours to it. And that's pretty much what they do. And then every once in a while, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, maybe 3 times a year or so, there's a meeting where people get together and they take their stuff out and they're like, here's a presentation, and then there's some there's some exchange of ideas, some stuff goes on, and then it's just right back to it. There's not kind of like, people aren't developing magical systems and then like going out and trying to work with other people or to try and to get that going. It's occultism seems to be like prevalent in magical practice. You don't get a lot of, and like it seems like a lot of the people that are out there in public is a lot of from the business sense. You've got people that are doing a lot of divinations and stuff, as a business plan, and they're kind of like the only people that are kind of out there. I think that's why Billy Brujo is so cool, because he's kind of one of the people that's coming out there and being like, here's all these magical like things that I see people, buying, and here's a way to make it. Like, yeah. Here's a way. Here's what they are selling you. They're doing this, this, and this. They're using this oil, and here's how to do it. And I think that's super cool. You know, I like that a lot. I think that's, you know, getting away from the occultism part of it and getting into the magic more. But that's not to say, I mean, there is a place and needs to be a place for people that just are professional magicians. That's just part of the world.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little smack. I don't like doing it. But so, you know, a couple years ago, I went to a Left Hand Path conference. And that's all it was presentations. It was just presentation after presentation after presentation. And
you mean like you mean a lecture and a ritual, or just a lecture?
No, just a lecture. Just a lecture. Dude gets on stage, does a lecture, done. Bring up the next one. And I hated it. It was not a good time for me, and it seemed like, you know, everyone was trying to just put on a show, and there was no true community building. You know, that might have happened later on and stuff like that I wasn't there. Okay, cool. So that's why, you know, if you ever see me out there and it says that I'm giving a workshop or I'm giving a presentation, there's going to be a ritual involved that you're going to be asked to participate in. That's just going to happen. You know,
that's absolutely the way it should. I mean, I learned that from Uncle Josh from the very fucking beginning, because you don't just give a lecture and then just not do rituals. I mean, that's the way I don't think we have ever, that's never happened really. I mean, pretty much any of the chaos things that we've taught, it's always been like, here's a little bit of material. Now we're going to do this ritual. Babylon is that way.
Yeah.
It has some kind of,
I tried the lecture method and I sucked. I mean, I'll just admit it. You know, it was not good. You know, I've got a couple recordings on Scroll of Thoth podcasts that are lectures, and you know, hey, great, listen to that in your spare time. But that's not what.
Well, I mean, it's one thing to listen to stuff when you've got time to be listening. But I mean, if you're gonna go out and go through the time of, you know, showing up somewhere at a presentation, it's like, I mean, you don't want somebody to go through all that trouble and not get something out of it, just, you know, get a lecture. I mean, if you're going to bother to actually show up to something, we both know how hard it is to get people to show up to magic stuff. I mean, so if you got somebody that's going to show up, at least do a ritual. You've got to at least be doing some kind of practice. They might spark an interest, and then they might come back. Yeah, certainly, you know, I think when doing public stuff, it's always important to have practical applications as well.
And you never know. You might start a friendship that creates an entirely new, you know, festival, entirely new festival grounds, and people who are there in it for a lifetime. So
yeah, absolutely,
go out,
man.
do rituals together.
So speaking of, I guess we can kind of cap off the night with. I know you've been, since Mr. Zai isn't with us this evening, I know you've been hot to talk about Twin Peaks, and
oh my God,
as Twin Peaks is not emergent related necessarily, we typically would not be covering this topic. However, given that next year is the year of the magician at Babylon, it's probably important to get it out right now. That we are going to do, much like Fish does a musical costume on Halloween and does an entire album by another band. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do magical costume for the Year of Magician at the Chaos Track. And we're going to all 3 days, full schedule. Everything is going to be Twin Peaks paradigm based.
And just to throw this out there, if there's any listeners out there who know how I can get a hold of a Air Force officer's dress uniform in my size, let me know.
Yes, Major Briggs would like a uniform. Yeah, so we're going to be building a Black Lodge. We're going to be doing, I mean, a lot of us have worked as, you know, as chaos magicians. This was my baby when I was first getting involved with chaos magic, and the IoT was the Twin Peaks paradigm thing, and it was incredibly fun for me. I was really into it. It was a couple year kind of project thing, and kind of the end result of that, you know, is Twin Peaks is back, which I always thought in the back of my mind it would be cool if some like more footage got released, you know, but I never thought that it would kind of go this far.
Didn't think you'd get episode 8.
I
Holy
did not.
shit.
Yeah. So like we're gonna. But anyway, so anybody then, and this is a 2-part plan. So we're gonna do a series of rituals there. Now, anybody that is that works magic, that works chaos magic, and already has rituals that can't attend Babylon, I'd like to encourage them to send them in. Because once we get done with all this, we're going to publish everything as the Magic of Twin Peaks in one book.
Oh my.
And try and get it to David Lynch.
Hey, dudes have done Kickstarters. That whole Magician Longs to See Tarot was a Kickstarter. They're still working on the licensing for that, but they're saying it's gonna come through. It's just a matter of time.
I mean, yeah. So we're gonna have to figure out all that. But yeah, I definitely want to put out the Magic of Twin Peaks book, which is a collection of all the rituals. Because we've done quite a few of them, and it'd be a lot of fun for people. People would love it. And hopefully, then Lynch would like lend his ear to Emergent Magic and EMK and mention us in the Twitter feed.
That would be fucking awesome.
And Frost, like the ultimate goal is to get them to read it at some point and be like, okay, I see what these guys are at with it. But flash forward, so a few things we've got outlined. Definitely next year, we're going to be doing the rock throwing at the bottle divination ritual, which of course has been repeated before. That'll already be on the schedule. Now, the Mass B that is performed primarily by the Illuminate the Thanateros, but more or less by Ohm at this point, and as a conglomerate. The Mass B, which has altered itself each year. Next year is going to be the Mass Bob.
Yes.
Therefore,
hold on. I need to stop.
Bob with Baphomet.
I need to stop. I need to rewind for everyone who has not watched Twin Peaks. Okay, there's a lot of people now who are into pop culture magic, using superheroes and stuff like that, which is totally cool if that's what you're into. But the thing about Twin Peaks is it is a modern mythology specifically designed with magic involved. It is a magical paradigm. Yeah. And they just come flat out and say it. It's about magic. So
it's a magical soap opera, essentially.
Makes it so good for doing this sort of thing.
Right. It's ripe with occult symbolism and imagery. The sky's the limit with it, and it's also done with a healthy dose of humor, which is going to help out a lot. It's perfect for the venue because we're out in the woods, and so much of it is about the trees. It's about the woods. The owls are not what they seem, and what you will. It's going to be kind of ideal. Also, we've done Twin Peaks stuff out there, and it definitely, check out the series, check out, the new series and Firewalk with me. But, even from a purely outsider standpoint, the Twin Peaks stuff is just so good. And, typically it's extremely well done because most of the people that have presented this material have been highly trained magicians thus far. But just as an example, one of the people in our tribe who was new to magic 3 years ago was like basically first magical meeting, first sets of rituals, had no exposure really to group magic before the weekend. And, it's probably the third day, maybe like half dozen rituals probably done, maybe less. And it was a Twin Peaks ritual, and it involved Laura Palmer, which is kind of like you could consider kind of the goddess of the Twin Peaks paradigm, and the midget, which is kind of like a gatekeeper type, and this demon Bob, who is kind of this vicious demon who is kind of the protagonist in the story. And anyways, this antagonist. Sorry.
Yeah, let's clarify that.
Right. The antagonist in the story. It depends on your viewpoint, really. But so yeah. Bob's essentially gonna interact with her, and she's wrapped in plastic, which is part of it. Laura gets discovered; it's a dead body discovered wrapped in plastic, which is a big part of the Twin Peaks universe. So at the beginning, we're writing sigils on the plastic, and the sigil, it was a generalized, like any sigil that you want. And this again loops back a lot, I think, to EMK and Emergent Magic. And I just found out this year, and he's like, I had no idea. I've never seen Twin Peaks. I have no idea about the paradigm, or no idea who any of these characters are, or anything about it. But that ritual had the most real world effect for me in my life of any of this stuff. And over the last 2 years, it's made me like believe in the stuff that you guys do. And he's like, you would have no way of knowing this, like, because I didn't say anything. He's like, but the sigil that I put on there was like, I wanted to fix things between me and my father because it was a bad relationship and we weren't really communicating. And he's like, since then, like, things happened and another thing would happen, and he's like, we started to kind of both reach out, and he's like, since then, like, it's come completely totally around, and we have this great relationship. We're talking all the time and we hang out again, and it's like, he's like, and I didn't think about it for a real long time, and then, when we were getting close to this, going back again this year, he's like, I started to think about it and think about the things again. He's like, I remembered that. And he's like, then I started to remember, that connection. And it's like, ever since then, it was like, I came back, and he's like, man, that was, I called them up, and ever since then, it's been this really good thing. And again, that's kind of a perfect example of, it ties into ancestors. Anytime that you're re-strengthening a family bond, like, that's the kind of magic that is EMK. That's emergent magic. That's kind of what that's exactly what we're talking about there. That kind of experience. So, you don't need to know the paradigm, to get results from it. And, certainly some people are not going to be as into it as others, but it's also kind of a challenge too for next year. I mean, like, magicians need to be challenged. We need to challenge ourselves. For people that haven't watched the series and aren't really into it or super excited about it, for them to have to watch it, or at least watch the movie. If you just watch Fire Walk with Me, the film, like, that's enough to do tons of stuff with. So you just spend 2 hours doing that, you're pretty much good to go. But I mean, it'll should be watching all of it, and I mean, most people will get hooked. But for people that don't, or like and have to struggle through it, to be able to come up with a ritual and a paradigm you don't necessarily love or want to work with, is going to make you a better magician, anyways. And there's so much symbolism and so much stuff, different characters and ways that you can approach it, that certainly you could take any kind of desire and write it into some type of ritual in that paradigm. And really, you could pretty much take any ritual you've already got, if you're smart enough about it, and just filter it through and reapply the different symbols to the paradigm of Twin Peaks, and should be good to go. So that's exciting. I think it's going to be really cool. We're going to do a magical costume. You're the magician next year. We're on the tarot cycle there. I know we've said that a couple times. I don't know. It's probably confusing. So the Babylon Festival was each year was a sphere of Kabbalah. For those of you who aren't familiar with Kabbalah, the Tree of Life glyph is essentially a map of the universe. There's 10 different spheres, each one being a different spiritual plane. Once we got to the 10th one, it starts the cycle again, and there's little lines, that paths they call them, that connect the different spheres in the Tree of Life. And it's really simple. If you look at it, just Google Tree of Life, Kabbalah Tree of Life glyph. And each of these different lines that goes all the way up to the top is the 22 major arcana of the tarot. So starting at the bottom, it's the Fool, is the 0 card that was this year. Next year will be the Magician, the first card. The year after that, number 2 is, I believe, the Empress, correct?
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. So the next, 21 years or so, we've already got themes for. So if you've got a specific thing you want to do, you can be like, okay, in 9 years, it's going to be whatever card. You can make it out that year. We'll be there for all of them.
We will.
So and what's exciting about this too is, so we'll do this year, and then we'll also do it again in 25 years.
Yes.
So,
yes. Okay.
2043, I think it is, or something. I don't remember exactly, but yeah. So.
All right. Well, I think that's a good note to end on.
I think so too. Absolutely.
Thank you for coming out, brother. We'll see everybody again in 2 weeks. Everybody have a good night.
All right. Cheers.